Hello and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I am sitting in front of my movie corner. I have my God the Father t-shirt on, my King of Kings movie right next to me, and as you can see by the frame around me, we are back taking down another atheist. I got some comments in my last video that some people, well actually I think it was Creaky Blinder Part 1, but if people are going to come into my comment section and demand to know my credentials and say, well, if you're not going to provide credentials, then you don't fit the bill, you should go back to what you're doing. That is an appeal to authority fallacy. Because what you're trying to do is that you are trying to say that people who spend most of their time people that are spending most of their time going around and, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to study the theory of evolution and then attempting to use that to justify their position are authority figures, then you probably don't really know that much about the evolution theory and what it actually proposes. Because there's a lot of holes in the theory. And that's one of the things that a lot of people say is they like to sit there and say, well, we scientists, or we evolutionists, at least we look at our stuff and we say, well, see, if this doesn't work, then we throw it out and we modify the theory. Why do you need to modify the theory at all? If it was true, wouldn't you have proven it true by now? I mean, like, if gravity exists, right? If I take this cup and I drop it, okay, I'm dropping the cup. It's hitting the floor. I mean, how many more times do you want me to do this before you figure out that, oh, it's a repeatable experiment? So, gravity is a law. Okay? The problem comes, I think, from people look upon religion, specifically Christianity, as being a burden, as being too stricture heavy, too, law heavy. It's you have to live by all these laws and blah blah blah. But the universe is run by fundamental laws. Okay? Laws that you and I can't change. No matter how much we would like it, we can't stop gravity from happening. Okay? We can't stop planets from orbiting the sun. We can't stop the sun from orbiting the center of the galaxy. We can't stop the galaxies moving. Okay? We just don't have that kind of power. No matter how much we would wish it to be. We're not God. We're not anything approaching an omnipotent being that can just snap our fingers and things can stop. Okay? There's no Q being out there, right? Okay, that can just snap their fingers and change space and time and gravity and everything else. Okay, it just doesn't happen that way. Okay, so we, as Christians, we recognize that there is an authority figure. Okay, and how do we recognize that authority figure? He gave us His Word. Now, Creaky Blinder said in his previous episode that he was not a that he was not a scientist nor a science teacher. And I said, so you haven't. And then he said, well, look, Kent, we're both, we both have something in common. We're both not teachers. And I said, yeah, but you'd have to provide some kind of citation to that effect, son, to be able to say with certainty that Ken Hovind is not a science teacher. You have to prove that he didn't go to school, that he never got a teaching certificate, that he never taught anywhere. Okay? And if you can't prove that, then what you're doing is you're spewing an ad hominem lie about your opponent because he's creaming your ass in whatever you're trying to debate him in. So you'd rather just stand there and say, well, see, I'm not a scientist or a science teacher, so hey, Kent, we've got people that say that you're not a teacher, so guess what? We're both not teachers. That's not an argument, son. Because you haven't put forth anything as to why Kent is or isn't a science teacher. You guys just say, oh, he misrepresents science the way that we see it, so because he does that, he's a crap guy. That's not an argument. Okay? Because you don't know what he is qualified to talk on and what he's not qualified to talk on. Okay? Were you there when he got his degree? No? Oh, I thought you were. Because if you're not there, all of that is just conjecture. Because you have the burden of proof to show that he is or isn't a teacher. Now, as to my credentials, it doesn't matter what my credentials are. Okay? I've studied this stuff in school, which is what most people should have done. And if you haven't, okay, if you didn't sit down and really learn this stuff in school, then I'm sorry to say that you're ignorant of the subject that you're trying to speak on. That was my point to Creaky Blinder. Okay? Now, another thing that you need to know is, don't come to my page and say, well, you don't know anything. Okay, that's your opinion. Specifics? What don't I know? And don't say everything. Okay? Because that's not an argument. That is a generalization fallacy. Okay? And the mere fact that I even have to say that this day and age is pathetically idiotic. If you think I've done something wrong, watch my video, okay? Write down where you think that I've done wrong. Post it up in the comments below. Okay? And I'll get to it. If it's too long, I'll do a comments on it. Okay? If I realize that it's like people are posting, huge, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of stuff, I'll get to it in a comments on comments. Because how I respond to people is I don't pick one line and then respond to it. I take the whole thing, I put it into a Word document, or sometimes I'll paste it into the YouTube comments, and then I will go down and I will select, 1, 2, 3 sentences, and then I will put quotation marks around it, and then I will answer that paragraph. Okay? Because what I'm doing is I'm answering the points being brought up. Okay? And so far, I've only really ever had 2 people that have done this kind of discourse with me in my comment section. Can't remember the first guy's name, but he was the one that I did a whole comments on comments where his argument was, well, I have all these PhDs backing up my assertions. How many PhDs do you have? And during the comments on comments, during my research for that comments on comments, I found out that what he was doing was similar to a lot of atheists and a lot of actual Christians do sometimes, is he was cherry-picking information because, so what he would do is he would look at, let's say, Darmay McCulloch, and he would say, well, Darmay McCulloch said, that we can't say with 100% certainty that Luke wrote the book of Luke and the book of Acts. So, therefore, Luke didn't write the book of Acts and the book of Luke. It's like, okay, did you read the next sentence? Because the next sentence says, we're about 80 to 90% sure that it was Luke. Didn't read that sentence, did you? Okay? And the other one was Turbo Brain. Okay, which I still need to get back to the comments on him, which I will get around to one of these days. I've just been busy with other videos and other things right now in my personal life, so I just haven't gotten around to that, but I will get back to that because I do need to destroy the rest of his points. I have a bunch of stuff that I'm going to do, and I also need to get some new kind of recording software because the OBS started just going wonky on me, and I'm not going to deal with it anymore. So I need to find a new recording software. So in the meantime, I'm going to finish these videos. I'm going to do a couple of other videos, and we're going to get to that. So let's jump back into this, And let's do that. So, again, if you don't like what I'm saying, you have two options. A, read what I'm, like listen to what I'm saying, take some notes, put it down below. You can timestamp it if you want, I don't care. Put your points down below, I'll respond to you. Or B, click off my videos. Just go. Okay? Because I don't care. Honestly. Okay? If all you're going to do is troll, I'm just going to say, ha ha ha, good for you. You're just a troll, go back to mama's basement. And 9 times out of 10, that usually shuts people up because they realize that they're just trolling and that they don't actually have any salient points to bring up. It's the typical argument of, I'm right, you're wrong, I win. That's not an argument, son. That's your subjective opinion. Okay? And it doesn't mean you won. Far from it. It means I won because you haven't brought up any points that I got wrong. Okay? So that we can have a civil discourse. You're just going, well, you're just wrong, and I'm right, so I win. Because Creaky's good. No, he's not. Creaky hasn't really brought up many, scientific points. In fact, in my rebuttal of him, I've brought up more science than he has. Okay? And I have yet to have a single person refute what I've brought up, other than just saying, you're wrong, I'm right, I win. That's not an argument. So let's jump back into Creaky Blinder's argument here, and let's keep going.
But it was very easy to find that out and then verify it using other sources. So, other than being a compulsive liar, what's your excuse for not knowing that?
So, what he was talking about there was, towards the end, Kent brought up that if light was traveling away from the Big Bang at faster than the speed of light, because that's what the people say, okay, then why would we see a blue shift? And he was like, well, because there's fundamental laws that hold the particles and the atoms and everything together, and so we see them expanding because it's the space between the galaxies that's expanding. And I said, yes, but tell that to the two galaxies that are colliding together. Tell that to the Andromeda galaxy, which is getting closer to us. Tell that to other galaxies that are moving closer to each other. If they were all expanding away from a center point, why are they now all of a sudden shifting and turning back on each other and going backwards? Why are they colliding with each other? That's my question. And he says, well, I just did some cursory Google searches. And you don't think that Kent Hovind hasn't looked into that? That's why he asked the question, Creaky. And that's why you did the Dillahunty dodge around the blue shift and just mentioned the red shift. Because the blue shift destroys your Big Bang theory. That everything is just expanding like a loaf of raisin bread. Good luck,
Mr. Science Teacher. And if you want to admit that you just don't know, that's fine. Because neither did I until I looked it up.
Every second after the Big Bang, the particles would have less gravitational attraction.
So as the universe expanded and cooled, fundamental particles combined into protons and neutrons and then into atoms, almost all of which were hydrogen and helium atoms.
So then how did we get all the other elements on the periodic table, Creaky? Because we can't fuse past iron very easily. In fact, it took us years to be able to even just come up with the process of being able to enrich zirconium into plutonium for nuclear fuel. And even then, we're using things like hydrogen and helium atoms to fuse, and it takes months to build the weight, the atomic weight of the zirconium up to plutonium. So how in the hell did all these other atoms come about? That's a question that Kent Hovind has asked repeatedly. Okay? Because it's part of his 6 parts of evolution. Okay? Chemical evolution. How did we get all the elements? No one's really answered that question. Okay? Because once you get past iron, because that's how stars go supernova, is their cores become iron and the iron can't fuse anymore. And so it explodes for a while and then it collapses into a blue dwarf. And after that, it doesn't fuse anymore. In fact, it stays that way until it basically becomes a black hole. It just gets denser and denser and denser and denser until it turns into a neutron star, where it is so dense that it pulls light into it. We call those black holes. So come on. Okay? You can say, yeah, there's hydrogen and helium atoms that flew around, okay? But how do we get all the other elements past iron? So now you're talking about silver and gold and lead and titanium and, you know, all that stuff. How do we get it all? Come on.
And this took several 100,000 years. Now, here's where the plot thickens and the deviations in symmetry come into play.
Okay, here's the thing. We don't know that it actually took hundreds of millions of years. They're assuming it took hundreds of thousands or hundreds of millions of years to develop those. But they don't know that. Okay? Because again, they weren't there. What they're basing this on is their experiments at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. Okay? They run particles around at the speed of light and then they crash them into each other and they observe it. Okay? And they go, could this possibly be what happened during the Big Bang? So then they run some mathematical calculations. And then they do it again. Bam. Okay? That produced a different result that time. Let's look at this. And then they plug it back in. Okay? But they don't actually know because it's all based on math that looks good on paper, but doesn't necessarily hold up in our fundamental universe. Because our fundamental universe, and you'd know this if you actually went to like a trade school, is when I was at Perry Tech, my trade school, okay, we had theory in the classroom. And then we go out into the lab and actually work with like transmitters and valves and different things. And you start to realize that what you learned on paper isn't what necessarily happens in the real world. Because in the real world, things have imperfections. Seals break. Stuff breaks down over time. It's called the second law of thermodynamics. Okay? And so things don't always work as they're intended. Because we live in an entropic universe. Okay? So knowing the math and knowing exactly what happened are two different things. And so what science does is they run some numbers, they crunch some numbers, they run them through computers, and they go, we know what happened. No, you don't. You have a mathematical model. In fact, I just had this conversation on Instagram earlier today. Now, some person falsely claimed that the Bible said that the earth is 4,000 years old. Okay, it was 4,000 years old at the time of Christ. It's 6,000 years old today. Here's the problem. Okay, somebody said, well, uranium is out there, and, uranium decays into this, into this, into this, into this, and then into lead. And I said, no, whoa. No. We don't know that. Because what we did is we measured the amount of radioactive decay from the thing. And we said, well, it takes so many thousands of, or millions or billions of years for it to decay from a certain point, and then like half of it decays. And then after another amount, another half of it decays, and then after another amount, another half of it decays. So you get less and less of what's known as the parent isotope over the daughter isotope. The problem being that we've never actually observed that happen. Because generally speaking, if you use uranium in something like a nuclear bomb, it doesn't decay. It explodes. Okay? So the individual atoms, okay, the neutrons emitted bounce into each other and create a kinetic explosion. Okay? In a reactor, you're doing somewhat the same thing. You're just controlling the amount of neutrinos bombarding each other. Okay? But after a while of heating the element of those things being within proximity to each other, okay, and they're bouncing around inside the reactor and against each other, it speeds up that half-life process. But after a while, it doesn't decay as much, and you don't get as many reactions. Not because it's turned to lead, but because it has now lost a number of neutrons from its core, okay, because it's unstable, and it's now become a stabler element, and so it doesn't emit as many particles anymore. And so what they have to do is they have to pick it up out of the reactor, and then they go put it somewhere, and then they put new rods in. Okay? My dad worked in the nuclear industry for 25 years. He taught me a lot about... I'm not a nuclear physicist here again. My dad studied nuclear physics. My dad studied nuclear reactions. My dad was a nuclear engineer for 25 years. Okay? And so he knows how this stuff works. And the problem comes in is that people assume that the parent-to-daughter isotope ratio stays the same. That there's no daughter isotope present at the formation. That's another thing that is very, very critical. When you hear people talking about, well, we know that that there's a certain amount of uranium in an ore sample, and there's some lead in the ore sample, and I'm like, you have to prove that lead, A, was not there before, naturalistically, and B, came from the uranium naturalistically. Oops. Because lead is a naturally occurring element. We can go out and find lead in the ground. Okay? So, you can't say that, oh, because there's some lead mixed in with the uranium, that uranium must have decayed into the lead over 4 billion years since the formation of the Earth. The uranium, if the uranium half-life is more than that of the lifespan of the Earth, and the Earth was a hot molten mass at the beginning, like most scientists now try to believe, the problem comes in that, well, here again, the uranium wouldn't have had time to form, let alone decay into lead. Okay? So, you face the same problem that we faced on the previous video, where here's an object that's 46 billion light years away, and the universe is only 13.8 billion years old. How can we still see the light? We shouldn't be able to see that galaxy. Because the light is that there's not been enough time since the formation of the universe to be able to get here. For that light to be able to get here. Because that galaxy could not be 46 billion light years away. It would only be 13 point so many odd billion light years away. You see what we're getting at here? That's the point. It's all based on assumptions. It's all based on mathematical formulas that people are writing down, and they're estimating that this is what happened, but they weren't there. They don't know. This is just a theory. Again, it's a theory that has never been proven. They don't know that the Big Bang happened. They assume that the Big Bang happened, but they don't know that it did. And therein lies the rub. And that's why people like Ken Ham, Kent Hovind, Mike Winger, all of these apologists on YouTube, including myself, are now saying you guys are believing in a religious belief is because you don't have the absolute proof necessary to be able to say, yes, this is how it happened. You're taking it on faith that what those scientists are saying happened. But you don't know. And unlike your theory, I have a lot more evidence for my book than you do for yours. And if I have a book that's 95% true, the other 5% is probably true too.
The very small deviations from absolute symmetry were then enough to trigger the collapse of the cooling atoms into gravitationally bound clouds and then into the first stars and galaxies.
Not necessarily. Because the normal gravitational pull for hydrogen atoms is very weak. Okay? So you would have to have a lot of hydrogen atoms in one location to start the formation of a galaxy. Because galaxies are 100,000 light years across. They're trillions and trillions of stars. You're talking gazillions and gazillions and gazillions of hydrogen atoms to even form one star, let alone an entire galaxy full of stars. And so, how would that work again? Because again, they would all have to congregate in one area enough in a vacuum where there are no other forces acting on it at the time other than just rapid expansion. So how would these atoms suddenly go, hey, I'm attracted to you? You see what I'm getting at? Okay? The atoms don't have intelligence. They can't, be running through space and then all of a sudden go, oh, hey, you know what? This is kind of dumb. Yo, boys, let's all get together and see what happens. It doesn't work like that, son. This is another one of those, and as if by magic moments, that, during all of this rapid expansion, as particles of light are speeding away, somehow, and as if by magic, as they started to cool down, they discovered gravity existed. Where did gravity come from? See what I'm saying? It's kind of pathetic to think that the universe itself has intelligence. And that's what they're presupposing has intelligence, is that the universe made itself out of nothing. That's Kent Hovind's whole thing, is you guys are believing that nothing caused something to explode over there against the laws of physics and against the laws of everything else, and then as it went out, somehow and as if by magic, gravity just decided to exist. And it just started pulling things together. How? We don't see that in a vacuum. Particles are perfectly happy just moving along on their own without running into anything. Because our sun is completely spherical, correct? And so if it's completely spherical, the particles from the sun are moving off in all directions. There are particles of light that have never been hit by anything that are moving through space right now, just happily going along. Atoms of hydrogen and helium and everything else moving along. No one knows where they are or what they're doing. Because they're just out in space somewhere. Not being touched by anything. They're not forming another sun. So, where's the agent for that? Where's the... This is what we think happened, because this is the problem. It's what scientists think happened. That's the theory. Okay? Because they don't know. But in order to get people like Creaky Blinder, Aaron Ra, Professor Dave Explains, all those other people on their side, they say, we know it happened this way. That's how they write their peer-reviewed papers. That's why a lot of us don't trust peer-reviewed papers, because they're just a backslappers club. It's just they send it out, the people give it a cursory look, and they go, it's fine. Whatever. It's crap.
But this process was very slow. A bit like you, Ken. And the first stars, called population 3 stars, took hundreds of millions of years to form.
It's not common sense. I don't know how they don't get it.
Well, it would seem that common sense isn't all that common in the creationist world.
The various planets are...
Creaky, I would be willing to bet that Ken Hovind has more common sense in his left hand than you do in your entire body. At this point. Because you've already admitted that you're not a scientist. And then all you did was look up a bunch of things. And Ken Hovind is showing you slides from Google. And all he's doing is poking holes in your argument. And you're not answering the argument. You're just regurgitating what other people have stated they think happened as part of the theory. But again, where did gravity come from? How did those particles know to suddenly come together? No one's ever explained that. And why don't we see that now? Because we've never seen a star form. Oh, they say that there's stellar nurseries out there, and you would think that in those stellar nurseries, somewhere, somehow, and as if by magic, a star would form. But we've never seen a star form. Because they start to discover that the stars that they think are inside the gas clouds are actually on the other side of the nebulas, and the dust is just clearing a little bit, so they're getting brighter. Son, you don't have anything. Okay? I mean, you don't have any way of saying that this is how things formed, because we've never observed it. Remember, science is things that we can study, observe, test, and demonstrate. Have we ever observed a star form? No. Do we know that's how stars form? No. Because again, it's based on math. It's based on conjecture. It's based on imagination. Because that's all they have. They don't know how stars form. They're assuming that's how stars form. It's the same thing with this right here that Ken Hovind is pointing to right now. The various planets are thought to have formed from solar nebula, the disc-shaped cloud of gas and dust left over from the sun's formation. Currently accepted method, by which planets formed is accretion, in which planets began as dust grains in orbit around a central protostar. Do they know that? Have they observed that? Have they seen it? Have they measured it? Have they tested it? Have they demonstrated it? No. Because again, they're assuming it happened that way. Somehow, and as if by magic. So they're assuming that when the sun got together, okay, somehow and as if by magic, all of the atoms got together, that there was some kind of nebula dust around that formed into Mercury and Venus and Earth and Mars. Now, the outer planets, we don't know how they formed because they're made up of gas. They're not made up of solids. But at least the inner planets from Mars up to Mercury, okay, those were supposedly formed by this accretion disk. But again, have they done it? No. Because we can't. And we've had asteroids floating around for supposedly billions of years between the Earth and Mars, and yet no planet has formed in all of that time. Why not? No one's been able to answer that either. I asked that in a geology class because I raised my hand one day. I was in my geology 200 class, and I raised because it was evolutionary geology, and I raised my hand and I said, why do we still have an asteroid belt then? Why hasn't that formed into a planet? Because those things are smacking around into each other. Why haven't the bigger ones attracted the smaller ones and created planetoids? Well, we don't know. That was the answer. Which means they have no clue how it actually happens. They don't know, son. So it's a theory. But see, they're avoiding the word theory by saying method. Is it a testable method? No. Is it a demonstrable method? No. Is it an observable method? Maybe. If we knew if that was the method by which it happened. Okay? Is it a demonstrable method? Is there anything in those four things? Observe, study, test, and demonstrate. Has it been observed? No. Have they studied it? No. Because all they can do is draw pictures like that, okay, and say this is how we think it happened. Okay? Can they test it? In a laboratory, can they test it? No. Can they demonstrate it? Naturalistically, can they demonstrate it? No. If you can't do those four things, you have left the realm of science. And now you're getting into religious fundamentalism, where you're pointing at people, and Creaky's doing this too, you're pointing at people and saying, well, you don't know, it didn't happen that way. But you have to believe it. Now we start to get into this. Okay? Now we start to get into the realm of thought policing, because you can't teach anything else but this, because that's it. And that's crap.
Thought to have formed from the solar nebula, a disc-shaped cloud of gas. Wait.
Hey, that's my line. Wait. It's just occurred to me that Kent is doing exactly what flat earthers do all the time. He's trying to disprove the Big Bang Theory by showing us all the information we need to be able to accept that the Big Bang Theory is the most likely mechanism for the formation of the universe.
No, Creaky. He's poking holes in the theory, in the Big Bang Theory. He is trying to say, hold up. How did they know that there was a disk of gas and dust that formed the planets? How do we know that gravity pulled all of this gas and dust together for hydrogen molecules to get together and create the sun? How do we know that this rapid expansion called the Big Bang actually happened? We don't. That's all he's saying. He's not saying it never happened. Maybe sometimes he says that. But he only says that after he's poked holes in it, okay? But when he starts, he's not saying the Big Bang Theory never happened. He goes, the Big Bang Theory is unlikely to have happened, and here's why. And then he shows you a bunch of slides, and he pokes holes in the theory. And then at the end of that, he goes, because of all these holes, we don't know that it actually happened. So therefore, it's likely that it never did happen. Because you can't prove it. Now, can I prove that Genesis 1 actually happened? Can I prove it? Beyond the shadow of a doubt, can I sit here today and say that Genesis 1 happened? No. I can't. But I have a book here, okay, that has mountains of archaeological, anthropological, and historical evidence that back it up. I have manuscripts that were written within a certain period of the events that are described in this book. Okay? Which means that likely events actually happened. Okay? Things like supernatural events, things like the flood, things like, all that. Because even geologists, they sometimes get blacklisted for it. Even geologists recognize that there was a global flood about 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. That's their estimation. That was in my geology textbooks when I was going through my geology class. Now, there are people that go out there. There's a guy who has collected a bunch of peer-reviewed papers because the papers show that there's like lakes, ancient lakes, that are about 4,000 to 5,000 years old, okay, out there. And when they study these lakes, they find certain fossils that are in certain layers halfway around the world. And they go, we know these lakes are only 5,000 years old, but there's fossils here that are in layers that we know are older than that. They don't know that for sure, but that's what they say. We know because they count the layers, and then they say, well, these fossils are in this layer, so it's this many millions of years old. Okay? Again, back to the circular reasoning thing. The problem comes in is that they can't rectify why this layer would have these fossils in something that is much younger than the layer is. Because if the layer is millions of years old and this ancient lake is only 4,000 to 5,000 years old, how the hell are these fossils in this layer at this time? And what that guy is doing is he is showing these papers and he is saying this is proof that there was a global flood, because there's no other explanation available for it. Okay? And as I've said many, many times before, okay, when you have an opportunity, you should read the book in 6 days. Okay? I've mentioned this many, many times. Get that book, read it. Because it's 50 scientists, actual scientists, PhDs, degrees, everything. Okay? They have all the paperwork you'd ever want, that basically wrote papers discussing young Earth creation, because there was no other way. Because when they started really breaking down the science, they started breaking down the barriers that science had put up. They started realizing that the science doesn't actually support old Earth, it actually supports young Earth. And it's being suppressed because basically, and that's why Kent brings up the fact that, like, during carbon dating, right? If the numbers agree, then it's perfect, it's golden, it goes in the text. If the numbers are off by a certain amount, then it goes in the same paragraph. If it's if they're way off, then it goes in a footnote, and if it's completely off by like, millions or billions of years, then they throw it out. Which means that every time that they do any kind of study, they automatically assume that when, like for instance, when they're doing carbon-14 dating, they assume that there was no radioactive carbon-14 in the sample when they started, and then they automatically assume that there's no daughter isotope in the sample when they started. And then they go through and they put all this stuff in, and then they put it down, and then they go, well, but see, we know. No, you don't. You assume. Okay? You assume. And therein lies the problem. It's all based on assumption. Okay? This whole thing is based on faulty mathematics and everything. Okay? Like even the Oort cloud, which they say is where comets come from. Okay? They say it's at 50,000 astronomical units. And an astronomical unit is one distance from the sun. From the Earth to the sun. That's an astronomical unit. That's what we use as an astronomical unit. Okay? And the whole thing was based. The reason why it's at 50,000 astronomical units is because it was a mathematical error by Oort. It probably should have been like, 500 astronomical units or 50 astronomical units or something like that. But 50,000 is absolutely asinine. No one could possibly know that there was a comet 50,000 astronomical units away. There's no physical way for them to know. Okay? Because the angular size of a comet at that distance, you wouldn't see it. And also, the gravitational pull of the sun at that distance would be so negligible that that comet wouldn't come near the sun. Think about it. Really marinate on it. Okay? Seriously. It's absolutely stupid to think that scientists 100% unequivocally know that this is how things happen. They don't. And you would rather have me believe someone who's going to intellectually put a gun to my head and say, you have to believe in this, versus a book that has way more evidence backing it up. I'm sorry, I'll take this book any day. Okay? Because I know that this book doesn't change. And it has never changed. Okay? Smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below, let me know what you think of the series so far. Next time we'll jump in a little bit quicker and we'll try to jump through a bunch more of this because we got about 7 minutes left on this video. And so, as we say, we will see you on the next one.